It was really an invasion. We will not allow our territory to be violated after 4 long years.
There have been more than 380 arrests in the last 24 hours of known terrorists, rapists, murderers, and illegal aliens in this country who have committed heinous crimes.
You're always going to target the most egregious public safety threats. But absolutely, right now is 100% the worst first.
Wow, President Trump's immigration crackdown moving full speed ahead. ICE now rounding up criminal migrants from coast to coast, including in the sanctuary city of Boston, where Fox got a firsthand look and exclusive look, I should say. And that is coming up. Welcome back as America Reports heads to a second hour. So much news today. John, I'm Sandra Smith in New York. Good to be with you.
Yeah, and there's just more that's going to keep coming this afternoon. We're all over it. I'm John Roberts in Washington. Deadly gang members, murder suspects, accused rapists, and violent criminals with lengthy rap sheets. Just some of the illegal immigrants being targeted in what ICE is calling a worst first approach. Nearly 500 arrests have been made since the raids began.
And the New York Post summing it up with today's cover, The Ice Man Cometh. Team coverage is here to break it all down for us. Paul Morrow is standing by in our New York studio. He will have analysis.
But first, we go to Bill Melugin. He's live in Boston, where he went on an exclusive ride-along with ICE earlier today. Pretty incredible access you got there, Bill. And how are things unfolding?
Well, John, ICE is incredibly surgical with these operations. They build intelligence on their targets for a week or two, learning when and where they're going to be somewhere. Then they go out and grab them. It's usually all over in less than a minute or so. And we got to see that firsthand. We embedded exclusively with ICE here in Boston yesterday. Take a look.
Good morning, everyone.
It's a frigid 5 degrees in the pre-dawn hours just outside of Boston, where this team of elite ICE officers is briefing on their targets for the day.
We're going to be targeting some extremely violent offenders today.
Within moments, the officers are on the move, with eyes on their first target.
Looks like we got movement, target vehicle coming out.
They quickly take him into custody. He's an MS-13 gang member wanted in El Salvador for aggravated murder. And he has an Interpol red notice out for his arrest.
We are targeting very violent threats to our community.
I'm not going back to Haiti.
One of those threats is this illegal alien from Haiti. ICE says he's a gang member with 17 criminal convictions in recent years.
Trump, you feel me? Yo, Biden forever, bro. Thank Obama for everything that he did for me, bro.
ICE Boston quickly takes down its next targets, including this illegal alien from Brazil, who has an Interpol red notice for armed robbery. This Salvadoran illegal alien charged locally with rape and released by a sanctuary jurisdiction. And this Dominican illegal alien charged with assault with a deadly weapon and heroin trafficking. Officers also arrested this Guatemalan MS-13 gang member facing gun charges. ICE says he was released from local custody just the day before. Their detainer request was ignored because of sanctuary policies. And in a sign of shifting priorities with the new Trump administration, this man, who was in the same apartment as the target, was also arrested after ICE determined he's also in the U.S. illegally. This is what ICE calls collateral.
So you guys got your main target just now, but you got somebody else. What just happened?
So our main target was released by a sanctuary jurisdiction, not honoring a detainer. That person was released back into the community, and when we went to go find him, he's with somebody else who was previously removed from the United States. So he's going to go today too.
And that is exactly what Border Czar Tom Homan has warned would happen.
When we find the bad guy, he's probably with others that are in the United States illegally. They may not be a criminal priority, but we're not walking away from them.
ICE Boston says they will continue to go into sanctuary jurisdictions and do their job.
Today was a good day. Today we took several significant public safety threats out of our communities. Unfortunately, a lot were released by sanctuary policies, but we're here to tell the Commonwealth and the rest of the country that we're going to find them whether they're released or not.
And guys, just a note on all the blurring in this story. We decided to hide the faces of the ICE officers because many of them work undercover. As for the targets they were going after, we blurred their faces if they have been charged with crimes but not convicted yet, only showing faces if somebody has been convicted of the crime. Do want to point out, during one of the arrests of the Dominican illegal alien, a woman in the neighborhood came out, went up to ICE and told officers, "Thank you for making that arrest." ICE officers responded and said, "You're welcome." So just goes to show, even in a sanctuary area like this, there are people out there who are thankful for ICE for the work they do in getting some of the bad apples out of the community. We'll send it back to you.
It really is pretty incredible to think that the cities in which they were living, the cities in which they presented a national security threat, weren't going to do anything about them. Great reporting, Bill. Terrific access. Thanks for bringing it to us. All right. Sandra.
All right, Paul Morrow's with us now, Fox News contributor and retired NYPD inspector. An amazing look that Bill Melugin just gave us there. You know, you look at the details of these charges of ICE arrests. In the first 33 hours of this administration, there's been 460 arrests so far. A Mexican national charged with aggravated sexual abuse of a child. A Mexican national convicted of second-degree assault of a child. A Colombian national convicted of sexual penetration with a foreign object. 6 illegal immigrants from Guatemala with criminal histories, including battery, child abuse, fraud, resisting arrest, DWI, trespassing, and vandalism. Is there anybody who doesn't think that these should be absolutely first on the list and deported and out of this country?
I think ultimately, yeah, and that must be the mayor of Boston, the mayor of San Francisco, the mayor of Seattle, the mayor of Portland, all of these city-level jurisdictions that are saying we're sanctuary and we're not going to cooperate. Now, here's where the rubber hits the road. Will they obstruct? Okay, because you're going to get to a point, right now they're picking up the low-hanging fruit, the people that they know are the worst of the worst first, as they say. But what happens when they want to go into detention facilities and say, you know, you got a guy in there, we want this guy for whatever reason, and we're going to pull him out? Are they going to obstruct? Because there's some indicia that some of these jurisdictions have said, no, we're not going to let. And I'm not talking about schools. I'm talking about jails. That's where the rubber's going to hit the road here. And what jumped out at me from Bill's excellent reporting, and it was really something, the red notices. Interpol had red notices on some of these people, and yet they're still in the country. An Interpol red notice means there's a warrant out for you. And I go back to the Rachel Morin case. This is why this stuff matters. Rachel Morin, that perp's going to go to trial, believe it or not, in April. He had a red notice on him. He hit our border 3 times. How do we let him go? We did. He came into the country, and allegedly, he's accused now of killing that poor woman down in Maryland.
Wow. This is a Chicago resident, P. Ray Easley, and an example of a Chicago resident who's been dealing with this huge problem in that city on needing Trump's deportations in that city. This was Fox and Friends earlier.
We understand that we are in the middle of an invasion, and every single person who came across that border came with an invoice on their back for the Chicago taxpayer. Nobody else gets to be shielded from federal crimes, and neither do they. We need everybody to go back where they belong so that we can reallocate our tax funds to the citizens of the city.
I mean, it takes you back to all these city council meetings where residents have stood up, they're fed up, they're speaking out, and they're saying, come do this, come do that here.
The analogy I always use to bring this down to ground levels, every cop has this story. You go up on a noise complaint, something low level, you knock on a door, you're in a housing project, whatever it is, and you handle the job. But as you leave, the old woman down the hall opens the door very quietly and says, they're dealing guns in that apartment over there. Most people in every neighborhood, I don't care where it is, they want to be safe, they want to support the police, they don't want to be prisoners in their own neighborhoods. The problem is they are not the loudest people. The loudest minority, a small percentage, drive the narrative that the AOCs of the world, that we're going to be going into schools, we're going to be dragooning kids out of there, and that a whole population is living in fear. It's not accurate. But just to show you how far this can go, right now, New York City just settled $92 million for unlawfully detaining migrants. Suffolk County on Long Island is Nassau County is facing the same thing, $60 million. So these jurisdictions are getting lawyered into being in defensive mode, and as a result, gangbangers, MS-13, child traffickers running around free, operating with impunity.
Wow. And the Chicago mayor's doubling down, by the way, saying everybody's welcome here. It's a welcoming city. We want to ensure that people have full protection under the law here in this city. You feel for those residents who are asking for help. Paul, if you could stand by for a moment, we want to get your reaction to another big story.
And it was a big day in court for Idaho murder suspect Bryan Kohberger as his defense team aggressively tries to get nearly all the evidence against him thrown out of court. Kohberger was charged in the brutal massacre of 4 University of Idaho students back in 2022. Our Dan Springer is live in Boise, Idaho with the latest from the hearing. What's happened so far, Dan?
Yeah, and John, this hearing started 3 hours ago, but it has all been sealed. No live stream from the court, so we're not able to hear and see the arguments, the critical arguments being made that will ultimately shape where this case goes when it does get to court here in Boise in August. We know this is a hearing on 12 motions to suppress made by Bryan Kohberger's defense team. In the court filings, they argue that virtually all the evidence collected should be thrown out because it was built on a house of cards, a relatively new police tool called investigative genetic genealogy. It's taking DNA left at the crime scene, in this case found on a snap to a knife sheath discovered next to 2 of the victims' bodies, and comparing it to massive databases of people's DNA given willingly to learn about their genealogy. It allows police to build a family tree and solve criminal cases.
It's a tremendously powerful tool, and of course law enforcement and prosecutors want to be able to use this. It's just whether or not it ultimately passes legal muster, which is yet to be seen.
IGG only really took off after 2018 when it was used to solve the decades-old Golden State Killer case. I could find only 2 times where its use has been attacked in a motion to suppress, and both times the defendants failed and they were ultimately convicted in those trials. In this challenge, the prosecution wrote, quote, "Idaho recognizes the United States Supreme Court's analysis and holding that great deference is paid to the magistrate's determination for probable cause. The search of his person was pursuant to a valid search warrant issued by a Latah County, Idaho magistrate based on substantial probable cause. Today's hearing will likely not be done today, so they'll extend it over into tomorrow, and we're not expecting a ruling from the judge on this critical issue of all these motions to suppress evidence until probably another couple of weeks. John?
All right, Dan Springer in Boise with the latest for us. Dan, thank you. Sandra?
Paul, back with us now. What will the impact of this be, Paul?
All right, so let's tease out what this is. So here's what happens. You go into the database as the police, you pull out this data that's in there, but it doesn't go to the specific perp. In this case, the accused is Bryan Kohberger. It goes 1 or 2 off to a relative, sometimes quite distant, second cousin, twice removed, whatever. Now you got from that a host of possibles, right? Let's say sometimes as many 20 or 30. Now comes the gumshoe work. You got to go, you got to figure out which one of these people is potentially related to the DNA we found at this scene. In this case, they reportedly they got back to the father. The DNA came back to the father. They looked at the father. They said, well, who's related to this particular person that could be in the area of where these crimes occurred? Lo and behold, they default to the son, and they say, this could be our guy. Here's the sort of fly in the ointment for the defense. Reportedly, that is not how they ultimately developed probable cause to arrest Bryan Kohberger. The timeline's a little fuzzy, but they had other indicia of the fact that he was the perp. And in fact, the probable cause for the search warrants they execute at his home in Pennsylvania and the arrest all came independent of this. That's already been decided by the first judge in this case when it was in Moscow. Remember, they got to change a venue. They moved the case out of there. So they're relitigating some of these things. Ultimately, I think it's a dead end. As the reporting says, this has been upheld in the courts. There's a standing issue. It wasn't your DNA. It was a relative's DNA. So I think they're going to pass muster on this. And by the way, I mentioned the Rachel Morin case earlier.
Yes.
That's how they got that perp, the same technique. This is a powerful tool. It's new technology, so the law is a little cutting edge. We're going to get there, and this is something law enforcement needs.
You are so good at what you do, Paul. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On both of those stories. Thank you. All right, John?
All right, Sandra, Fox News alert to the Senate floor we go now, and John Ratcliffe does have the votes necessary to become the next CIA director, to be confirmed to that position. 65 yes votes to 22 no votes. We expect that there's maybe another 13, 14 votes outstanding, but he is well over the 50-vote threshold, or 51-vote threshold needed to be confirmed, so he will become the next director of the Central Intelligence Agency. We'll keep watching that vote. We'll get a final tally for you just as soon as it's over.
You will indeed. All right, John, thank you. The Trump administration, meanwhile, will soon pause funding for gain-of-function research that some lawmakers link to COVID. Will this affect our ability to count pathogens? We're going to ask that question to Rand Paul. He will be joining us, the senator, with us next.
The Trump administration is working on an executive order to stop funding of so-called gain-of-function virus research. Supporters of the controversial method say it's crucial for scientists trying to learn more about dangerous pathogens, but critics, like our next guest, have linked it to the origins of COVID-19. Let's bring in Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, Homeland Security Committee Chairman. I want to get to that in just a second, Mr. Chairman, but first of all, quick reaction to John Ratcliffe appearing to have the votes to become CIA director and the fact that the Democrats are slow-walking a lot of these nominees.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to make any significant point that the public's going to rally to. The president just won an election and I think deserves to have votes on his cabinet. Rubio was approved almost unanimously. Now Ratcliffe is done. Pete Hegseth is going to be approved in just a couple of hours. And he is going to win. It's going to be very close. After that, Kristi Noem's going to win. I don't know of any of them they're going to block so far, but just delaying them basically shows petulance, but doesn't show any real patriotism or any sort of principle.
All right, we'll keep watching as the confirmations proceed. Let's get back to this potential executive order on halting, at least temporarily, gain-of-function research. Do you think it should be stopped altogether, Senator, or just more guardrails put on it?
You know, I'm for a temporary ban on gain-of-function research because it's very dangerous, but we also have a bill we'd like to follow up. We'd like to make a law, and in the law, what we would do is create a conference or a committee of scientists, 9 scientists, who would have the ability to look at all this dangerous research and the ability to take money away from it or deny funding for it. It would be on a one-by-one basis in case there is any research that is deemed to be healthy and exceptional. I can tell you as a category, though, most of the time, if you're taking something like Ebola or coronavirus and you're mixing it together with an unknown and then running it through cell lines that have mice with human lungs, you're gaining and functioning and making something more infectious and you don't know the outcome. That's a crapshoot and really shouldn't have been done in Wuhan, shouldn't be done in unsafe labs, and really should be scrutinized. So we do need more scrutiny. I'm pleased that Trump has a temporary ban, and I'm going to try to convince them to pass my bill, the Risky Research Review Act, in the meantime.
This is something you've been concerned about for a long time. I want to flash back 4 years to this particularly tense exchange that you had with the then director of the National Institutes for Allergy and Infectious Disease, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
You're fooling with Mother Nature here. You're allowing superviruses to be created with a 15% mortality. It's very dangerous. I think it was a huge mistake to share this with China, and it's a huge mistake to allow this to continue in the United States.
Again, we have not funded gain-of-function research on this virus in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, no matter how many times
you're parsing
you say
words.
it,
There
it
was
didn't happen.
research.
You have said that Fauci should go to prison over his dishonesty regarding the COVID-19 virus and the gain-of-function research. But, Senator, he is now protected by a preemptive presidential pardon.
History is going to judge him harshly. By accepting that pardon through Supreme Court precedents, he's actually accepting his guilt, so he's accepting culpability. He made the decision to bypass and to avoid the safety committee, to fund this without adequate review of its safety. He made a terrible decision, but you have to realize it wasn't a one-off. For over a decade, Anthony Fauci had said that the risks of a pandemic occurring were worth the benefit of the knowledge. Most other scientists disagree with that. But the idea that we could do anything to any virus, and if it escapes, oh well, whoops, too bad, the knowledge is worth it, it's not. There are viruses that could kill 50% of humanity. We should not be trying to aerosolize Ebola or aerosolize the avian flu or make it easier to transmit the avian flu among humans. Right now, our biggest benefit is the avian flu can get into humans, but it's not going human to human. If you were to work in a lab with the avian flu, you can probably make the virus go to human with intended or intentional mutations. That would be a disaster. And anybody who wants to do that in the lab should never be funded by the taxpayer. So Anthony Fauci was wrong about all this, and he's going to be judged harshly by history.
Just keeping account of the vote for Ratcliffe, 98 votes are in now. He's got substantial bipartisan support. He's got 73 yes votes to 25 no's. Donald Trump appears to have inherited a national security threat, the degree to which did not exist in his first term. Here's what the chairman of your committee, Homeland Security, Mark Green, had to say about it. I'm sorry, he's chairman of the House Homeland Security. He said the New Orleans terror attack was a stark reminder that the terror threat to America is alive and persistent. Emboldened by the national security blunders of the past 4 years, foreign terrorist organizations and jihadist networks abroad remain committed to recruiting and radicalizing individuals on U.S. soil. Make no mistake, all the lights are still blinking red. The former FBI director, Christopher Wray, warned about this more than a year ago. How much of this occurred over the past 4 years, and how difficult a task does President Trump have ahead of him to try to turn it around?
I wouldn't blame all of this on Biden. The open border, I'd blame on Biden. The fact that terrorists may have come across the border. The particular terrorist that was in New Orleans, though, was homegrown, wasn't an immigrant, wasn't here illegally. They're harder to try to stop. And I would also say that I'm not so sure it's worse than it was right after 9/11. Is it a problem? Absolutely. Do we have to be careful? Do we have to try to do everything we can to stop this from happening? Yes. But I'm not so sure it's all to be blamed on Biden. I think it's just something we're going to have to pay attention to and do what we can to stop.
All right. Senator, thank you for being with us. It looks like the final vote tally is going to be 74 yeas for Ratcliffe, 25 noes. Senator Fetterman not voting today, so the total vote count was 99. Thank you, Senator, for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Sandra.
All right, more than 2 weeks of intense fighting now. New wildfires are erupting in Southern California. An update from an LA County fire captain on the current conditions on the ground. That's next.
Plus, fears of a big cleanup in the South after record snow, but some folks aren't too concerned. Wait until you see what a snowball fight between nuns looks like. That is coming up. Fox News Alert, and it looks like John Ratcliffe has been confirmed as the next director of the CIA. 74 yes votes to 25 no votes. That's a total of 99. John Fetterman did not vote, so there's no more votes that are going to be coming in. We don't yet have the official roll call, but we assume that all of the Republicans voted for him, as did 21 Democrats. Just ahead on coming up in the Senate is going to be a test vote on the nomination of Pete Hegseth to be the Secretary of Defense. It's believed that, and Hegseth believes this himself, he told me the other day, that he's going to lose at least 2 votes, likely Murkowski and Collins, maybe McConnell as well, which would take him down to 50, which would mean that the Vice President, the President of the Senate, J.D. Vance, would have to come in for the tiebreaker. But Hegseth was very confident as of Friday night that he was going to become the Secretary of Defense. So we will keep watching that. Sandra?
Right, we will, John. Meanwhile, another wildfire is breaking out in Southern California right now. It began just a couple hours ago and is quickly spreading. As you can see, they're in constant efforts to contain this. This is after 2 other infernos began spreading yesterday, and with crews still working to fully contain some of the fires that started this chaos 16 days ago. Let's bring in the captain of the Los Angeles County Fire Department, Sheila Kelleher. Thank you very much, Captain, for joining us. Please do give us an update on this fire out of Camarillo. As we keep seeing the images, just another stunning inferno.
Yes, that one just came out, so we're still getting all the information that's coming in through that. But it's in a good position where they got some air attack on that. They should make quick work of that fire. But it's red flag conditions are throughout the region until tomorrow about 10 o'clock. Our crews made excellent work last night on the Castaic fire, which exploded over 10,000 acres. But a coordinated effort from the ground and dozers, along with the air attack, really helped knock the heat out of that fire last night, which was incredible to see because it pushed it away a major canyon and kept it out of communities and residential areas. So no structures were impacted, and that fire was moving incredibly fast yesterday.
Captain, 3 new wildfires. People are wondering if there's any end in sight for all of you.
I'm hoping Friday, when this wind stops, this red flag warning is no joke. We have some of the lowest relative humidity that we've had. 15 over here 7%, incredibly dry fuel moisture, and there's a lot of fuel, as well as these winds gusting upwards of 60 miles an hour in some of the passes.
What are we calling this fire out of Camarillo, the Laguna fire? Is that correct?
Again, with all the interviews I've been doing, I'm just getting word of the Laguna fire.
You're just getting word of it. Okay, because it's north and west of you. Have you heard about how big that is? Any idea of size of that right now?
If the images you have on are accurate and current, you're looking at about 50 acres right there, and it looks like they've got a lot of resources surrounding that. So that just based on what I'm seeing.
Okay. Speaking of resources, to contain these other fires, what's needed right now?
We have what we need. We've got a lot of equipment in this area, and a lot of equipment has surged over to help us on the Castaic fire from the Eaton fire as well as the Palisades fire. We have a robust air attack, which is really important because they are really facilitating the extinguishment of this fire with the fire retardant drops. The fixed wings will be dropping all day. The helicopters flew all night along with our heli-tankers. The winds are not strong enough that are grounding them. That's where we make our biggest progress, along with a coordinated effort with the dozers on the ground and our hand crews.
Got it. As far as the firefighters are concerned, we had one on at the top of the last hour. He said morale is good. People are strong. Are you getting the same sense? I mean, people have got to be exhausted.
Absolutely. There is fatigue across all of Los Angeles County and Southern California with these fires. However, the boots on the ground are fresh. They've got a great system of rotating in fresh firefighters who've had at least 24 hours rest. That's really helpful and critical. I think some of the people that we're concerned about are our families who are worried for us and that have been our support system, along with our admin staffs and all the support and logistic people that really back up these fires from the ground up. I know they've been putting in incredibly long hours for the last almost 3 weeks.
Okay. Weather's going to be everything, as you mentioned at the top there. Captain, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it. And our best to you and your firefighters. All right, Fox Corporation's made a $1 million donation to the Red Cross's California wildfires relief efforts and continues to be an annual disaster giving program partner. This enables the Red Cross to respond immediately to disasters by providing safe shelter, hot meals, emotional support, and resources to aid in recovery. Here's how you can help. Visit go.fox/Red Cross or scan the QR code on your screen. Every little bit counts because there are 3 new fires that they are currently trying to fight, in addition to those that are still going. John?
Boy, they're in a tough fight, but they are doing their best. Extraordinary work. All right, back to the Senate, and John Ratcliffe confirmed to be the next director of the CIA. Looks like probably 21 Democrats voted for him. The big question is, how many Republicans are going to vote for Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense? There's going to be a test vote coming up in the Senate in just a little while, and we're following that. And if the test vote is on right now, actually, so we'll keep monitoring that. Aisha Husney is live on Capitol Hill with the very latest. Aisha?
Yeah, guys, good to see you. Remember when I was talking about the train station, how the Senate is just a one-track train station? So John Ratcliffe's train just left the station, and now they can finally bring in Pete Hegseth's train. And the first vote, this is not the confirmation official vote they're doing right now. That's going to happen tomorrow. This vote that we're watching right now, it's about to begin, is to overcome the filibuster. And the threshold that they have to meet is a simple majority, so 51 votes. This is a very critical vote for Pete Hegseth because it's going to tell us how his final official confirmation vote is going to go. Now, in talking with a bunch of senators, talking to Republican senators, it sounds like they have the 50 that they need. I just spoke with Chairman of the Armed Services Committee, who is in charge of Pete Hegseth's confirmation, Roger Wicker. I asked him, do you still have the 50, even though you've lost Lisa Murkowski on Pete Hegseth? He says yes. So they do believe that they will have the 50 to get through this. Now, will they have the 51 that they need? We don't know that yet, because again, they could lose Susan Collins as well. They could lose Mitch McConnell. And if that is the case and they've lost 3, they'll have to bring in Vice President J.D. Vance to come and break the tie. We've seen that before with Biden nominees when they would always bring in Vice President Kamala Harris to break the tie. That might be what we see here with some of these more controversial nominees from President Trump. So this is a very critical moment here in time because Pete Hegseth is probably watching this very closely because this is going to tell us how his confirmation vote is going to go. If we're even going to have a confirmation vote, he has to get over this hump first. But again, once they do, if they can get over the filibuster, they will set up a vote for tomorrow night. And it would happen tomorrow night, John, because we've been talking about this all day. Democrats are jamming up the Senate. They are invoking that 30-hour debate rule. Normally, the two sides will come to an agreement. It's called a time agreement here in Congress, and they would just agree, you know what, we're going to skip that. We're going to skip all the process, and we're going to get right to the vote because we know we have the votes. But Democrats are making this very painful for Republicans. They do not want them to swiftly confirm any of these more controversial nominees. They're going to make them debate it out on the floor. So watching this vote very, very closely to see what Pete Hegseth's fate really is.
So Senator Chris Murphy invoked the 30-hour debate rule over Ratcliffe's nomination. The fact that he got close to a couple of dozen Democratic votes, what does that say about Murphy's tactic?
Well, there was a lot of talk about whether Murphy was sort of freelancing here because Senate Republicans told me that they believed they had an agreement with Chuck Schumer on a time agreement. They thought that they were going to go right into this vote because he does have bipartisan support. There are Democratic colleagues that wanted to vote for him, and they did today, as we saw that. So they were a little confused as to what was happening with Chris Murphy. But then I asked Chuck Schumer about it today. I said, did you know about it? Do you support it, that he's doing this even with these bipartisan nominees that you guys support? And he said he does support it. He said that this is what they're going to do with every single nominee that does not have unanimous support. So we're going to be here a very long time. It's going to be a very slow process in the Senate, John.
Yeah, and in the meantime, the president doesn't have his national security team in place. Aisha, thank you for the update. Appreciate it. Sandra?
Got it.
All right, a federal judge calling President Trump's executive order ending birthright citizenship, quote, blatantly unconstitutional and temporarily blocking it. Fox News legal editor Carrie Urban is up next on where things go from here.
Federal judge in Washington state temporarily blocking President Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship. The ruling coming down last hour. This was the first of several legal challenges to Trump's day one order. Fox News legal editor Carrie Urban was here when the news broke, and she's here to talk more about this. So here's what the New York Times wrote about Judge John Kuhnhauer's ruling. Kuhnhauer sided, at least for the moment, with 4 states that sued. This is a blatantly unconstitutional order, he said. Frankly, he continued, challenging Trump administration lawyers, I have difficulty understanding how a member of the bar would state unequivocally that this is a constitutional order. It just boggles my mind. But when you go back to the original intent of the language of the 14th Amendment in 1868, it was exactly the opposite of what Kuhnhauer said.
It was, and no one is talking about this, and it's certainly not in the ACLU brief because they go back to the history, but no one is talking about that clause, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, was written by a senator who was giving speeches at the time who specifically said this does not include aliens. Like, that was a known thing. The reason birthright citizenship, like I said earlier, has become, the thing of this country is because of that later decision in 1898 from the Supreme Court. But as I explained earlier, the context, the time was very different. That court, the high court there, specifically emphasized that the parents of this Chinese national who wanted his U.S. citizenship, he'd been born here, had been, quote, permanently domiciled here. And also at the time, his parents were legally here because it was almost impossible for Chinese nationals to become citizens. So I think there is a way to make, to distinguish what the culture now, like I said earlier, there's a birth tourism industry. And I'd also know, what the judge made that comment about, he's never heard these kinds of arguments. The person who was arguing those is a respected constitutional law attorney. He's a former colleague of mine. And it's a little hard to believe that this judge says he's never heard anyone make these when people like Richard Posner has been saying for years it's not constitutional.
Okay, so you and I were talking about this when you were last here, though not on the air. Excuse me, and that is that that clause of the 14th Amendment was written with some ambiguity. And why wouldn't he have delineated it more carefully?
Because I really think that we're looking at the 14th Amendment through a very 2025 lens, a pair of glasses. Because again, at the time, it was written to address the egregious Dred Scott decision, which said that African Americans were not citizens. Right. And so this was to undo that terrible harm and say, well, obviously, people from Africa have been here for hundreds of years. Like, to deny them citizenship and the rights that comes with that is ridiculous, and it's crazy. And so when he was making these speeches, the senator who wrote that clause and said, this obviously doesn't include aliens, It's because it was obvious. Like, everyone understood. Well, if no one was thinking about, China charging people 30, or people in businesses in China charging women $30,000 to $100,000 to come over here, hole up in a hotel in Beverly Hills, have a baby, fill out citizenship paperwork, and go back home. I mean, that was obviously not on the minds of people during the late 1860s.
Different world
so
now.
It is a different world and a different set of circumstances. And so that's why I think it continues to be a fascinating legal issue that scholars on both sides of the aisle continue to debate.
Want to get to this before we run out of time. Trump and the executive order rescinding the security clearances of the 51 former intelligence officials who wrote about Hunter Biden's laptop. One of those officials was John Brennan, the former CIA director. Here's what he had to say about what Trump did.
He misrepresented the facts in that executive order because it said that we had suggested that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. No, we said it was for the hallmarks of Russian information operations. This was just, his effort to try to get back at those individuals who have criticized him openly and publicly in the past.
All right. Trump suggested that the Hunter Biden laptop Trump said that we had suggested the Hunter Biden laptop story was disinformation. No, we said it was one of the hallmarks of Russian information operation. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just said with a different inflection.
It's hard for me to watch John Brennan say that and to see him say that with a straight face. When if you read the letter, I went back to refresh my memory because I was at DOJ at the time, and I was horrified by what those 51 officials were doing. The entire letter is Russia, Russia, Russia. In fact, at the beginning of the letter, they say that Americans should determine the election, not foreign nations. And how about this? You know how they ended the letter? It is high time that Russia stops interfering in our democracy. I mean, give me a break. And the whole reason, of course, is because of this laptop that was dropped off at that computer shop. That the New York Post had broken that story. These officials came out and said, "Oh, it has all the earmarks of a Russian campaign." And the reason they did it when they did it, John, if you remember, is because the presidential debate was happening 3 days later. They did it to tee it up for Joe Biden to use on stage and cite against Donald Trump. And it was such a lie.
And Trump really hit these 51 in the pocketbook because their security clearance really is the coin of the realm for them to stay employed.
Yeah, well, they shouldn't have lied about this, so.
All right. Carrie, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Sandra?
All right, as President Trump closes the book on DEI and the federal government, now we're learning just how much taxpayers had to pay up on those initiatives under Biden's watch. President Trump saying bye-bye to DEI. Just how much did taxpayers have to foot the bill for it under the last administration? Fox Business correspondent Hillary Vaughn has been counting up the dollars. She's live on Capitol Hill. So just how much will be saved by doing away with this, Hillary?
Sandra, we're still doing the math, but it will end up being millions of dollars that taxpayers have spent on these DEI programs. And I know you're familiar with the live debt clock that tallies up how much taxpayer money is being wasted in real time. Well, there is now a live Doge clock that tallies up in real time how much taxpayer money is being saved by cutting out things like these DEI initiatives. Some of these savings will come from President Trump killing DEI programs embedded in the federal government. The full cost, though, is still being added up. The price tag already in the millions. According to Open the Book, federal agencies have spent millions on DEI programs, and this is just what we know about. There are over 400 federal agencies that have to be accounted for. HHS spending $68 million on DEI programs, employing 290 DEI staffers. The EPA spending $3 billion on DEI, and employing 200 DEI staffers. The State Department spending $73 million on DEI initiatives in 2025. Republicans, though, are applauding President Trump for finally getting rid of DEI.
All federal workers ought to be done based on meritocracy. It shouldn't be based on diversity, equity, inclusion. It should be, how do we get the best workers to do it?
This has nothing to do with opportunity for everyone. This is cultural Marxism. DEI was meant to divide the room by race, and it's poison.
There is already an effort by some agencies to try to skirt around some of these roles. ATF in particular is being called out by one congressman for changing the title of their DEI officer to a senior executive. Sandra?
Wow. Hillary Vaughn on that for us. Hillary, thank you very much. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, everyone, our mission is to provide complete...
All right, so we got the results of the test vote on Pete Hegseth that just took place in the Senate. 51 votes yay, 49 votes against. This is to break the filibuster, and it could be, Sandra, that while he got 51 votes to break the filibuster, he may not get all those votes in final confirmation, because some senators may say, let's let the process proceed, but may vote differently. We've seen that in the past.
We'll keep watching it. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith.
And I'm John Roberts. We will see you again tomorrow for Friday. The Story with Martha starts right now.